Good morning. Welcome to the 2019-2020 school year. I like how we established the front row about halfway back. And I thought about putting tape somewhere in the theater, like to restrict where people could sit, but I'd had to put it in the first six rows to keep people out of the front, because I was just telling them that I'd be the last person to get upset or mad at someone who's sitting in the back, because that's where I sat. And I'll tell you some story. It's true that I did have a panic attack one time in college when the professor, can you imagine college seating arrangement? And this professor, I don't know why he wanted me close to the front, but he put me close to the front. I had a panic attack one time. So I just used that story to claim I have an aversion to sitting in the front. Preachers have believed me, bosses have believed me, kind of, when it comes to that. But as we get started, first, let's acknowledge that for you, for us as a system, Galena 499, 3 different superintendents in 3 different school years can be very unsettling. In fact, 3 superintendents in 3 different years can be quite scary. And we get it. In fact, sometimes when we're unsettled and we're considering or we're facing some of these changes and the uncertainty that comes with changes, inevitably there will be questions that come to the surface. Things like, I wonder what's going to be different. Well, there's a no-brainer. I have to come up with that. How about this one? Because this is really what I think is underneath any of the questions. Is that new guy going to destroy all the amazing things that we've already got going on in Galena? Or, here's my favorite. Really, this one's my favorite. Did I say the other one was my favorite? Okay, this one's really my favorite. Is he going to change the dress code at the high school? There's a vicious rumor about that. But really the questions are about, who is he? What's his story? As we think about change and successfully transitioning through change, one of the top priorities, one of the most important things that we can do at the very beginning is to get to know each other. Find those connections that can build in the future or toward the future as positive, strong, trusting relationships. So today, we're going to continue that process of getting to know each other just a little bit better. A little bit better. One of the things that I hope, because it's my intention, it's my goal, that you'll notice early in the school year is that I'm going to be around. Renee is going to be around. We've talked about this. What is something we can do to accelerate the relationships, getting to know you, you getting to know us, and it's being there, having conversations, being present. So hopefully you'll notice that we're there. We're in the hallways, we're in the classrooms, we're in the faculty meetings from time to time. Another thing that you might notice is different, I'm going to put it out there just so you know, why is the guy got a video camera all the time? And we did the video camera before, and there was a whole different reason for the video camera before. But today, the reason, I do appreciate you so much, Dan, and when you hear this reason, I hope you don't go, what? Why am I doing this? One is that I like to watch it because I have different opportunities to tell some of these stories, and I constantly want to tell the story better, or the stories better. The other thing that was really lapel mics are kind of interesting. I was presenting one time with a lapel mic. I was presenting one time with a lapel mic, and we took a break. Do I even have to tell the rest of it? Thank goodness there was one person in the list of participants who liked me and could gain access to the facility in which I was just there. Came bursting through the door and told me that my microphone was still on. And they could hear me loud and clear in the room. Thank you very much. The most important reason why that video camera is there is because when I tell my story, it includes my mom, my dad. There's some interesting things. Oh, they're interesting to me. I hope you find them interesting too. But my mom and dad and my wife. And for different reasons, they're not able to be here today. I mean, they're healthy, it's good, all those things. There's no tragedy going on with that. But they're not able to be here and they want to see it. Dad wants to make sure when I'm talking about him, I say it just right. Because he's still my dad. He's still my dad. But anyway, so a little bit of an explanation as to why I'll be telling some of my stories today. As you hear the stories, what I hope happens is that you hear and you start to notice that there are parts of the story that are really similar to your story. Or maybe that within those stories, there are some connections that you can make to the stories that you're hearing and the stories of your family, your friends, your colleagues, your community. You can see yourself or your family and friends in some of these stories. So, we begin. That's almost like a magic trick, taking off a jacket and not losing the lapel, right? If I'm going to tell a story about me, I'm going to start with my maternal grandparents. Second generation immigrant farmers who settled in southern Illinois. From that union, there were 6 children. My mother was the youngest of 6. My grandpa Paul, he was a strong, stubborn man. Strong. Every year at the county fair, my grandfather put on a display for those to watch. He would hook himself to a plow and he would pull a plow. His demonstration of strength. His stubborn. When they finally got running water at the farm, Grandpa didn't have a lapel mic on. But Grandpa refused to use the watershed in the house because it just didn't seem right to do something like that in your home. And he wouldn't change to the day he died. I mentioned that my mother was the youngest of 6, and in many ways my mom was the lucky sibling because the first language in the home was German. And as the youngest of 6, her 5 other siblings were able to help her learn English so that when she went into town to the public school in her 9th grade year, she was pretty good at the English. She was really good at speaking English. Very social. She wanted to be an athlete. In fact, the county fair piece. Another fun thing for the Krieger family, excuse me, at the county fair was the quasi-track meet, and they would have foot races. And my mom was very proud of the fact that no child her age could beat her in a foot race at the county fair. Until the 8th grade year, there was finally a boy who was faster than my mom. She wanted to be an athlete. They didn't have sports in her high school, so she was a cheerleader. Straight A student. Liked people around her to be happy, a pleaser. She had dreams of being a nurse. And was elected homecoming queen her senior year. She was not so lucky as the youngest of 6. Because when she was 8 years old, her dad, my grandpa Paul, went into the hospital for a relatively routine procedure, which seems a little bit odd now, to have an ulcer surgically removed from his stomach. Unfortunately, as a result of a blood clot, my grandpa didn't come home. And at the age of 8, my mother was an English as second language, living in a single-parent home. Now on my paternal side, my grandpa Moe fought in World War II. He drove a tank. He was in charge of a tank. He had some other soldiers that answered to him, etc. And during World War II, while he was on leave, he was in Fort Knox or somewhere in there, it's Kentucky. Fort Knox, is that Kentucky? I'm sorry, geography teachers. Former math, right? So somewhere in there, he met my grandmother at a military social event. All right? Grandpa was on leave. He meets this pretty girl. They hit it off. A couple years later, they're married, and they're celebrating the birth of their first child. The day after my dad was born, my grandma tells Grandpa, hey, Lawrence, I know you think I'm 19, but I'm only 17. And I know that makes the night that we met, I wasn't really 17. I was really like almost ready for my 15th birthday. My grandpa was a little upset. And based on his reaction, Grandma then got upset back. There was a little fight. You know the Molders, we can, oh yeah, never mind. It is interesting to note, though, now when we go back and visit Grandma, Dad has asked her, he says, now, Mom, you tell it like it was irreconcilable fight between the two of you. She said, it was bad. And Dad says, Mom, my sister Patsy is only 10 months younger than I am. Well, life's too short to hold a grudge. Short to hold a grudge. So anyway, Grandpa fought in World War II. He drove a tank. We didn't know much about his experiences in World War II because we weren't allowed to ask Grandpa about his experiences in World War II. So after his funeral is when we started to uncover some of the different facts or interesting points of his experiences. One was cleaning out the shed in the backyard where we found the German Luger. It had the firing pin removed from it, but all these years he had a German soldier's Luger back in the shed. No one knew it because Grandpa's mangy old dog that would let no one near that shed except Grandpa is where he kept it. At his funeral, I went back home, was a pallbearer, and I remember sitting out front on the front step with another pallbearer, one of Grandpa's friends in town, and he'd say, Trey, he said, your grandpa was the hardest working man I've ever met. Hardest working man I've ever met. And it made sense to me. I remember Grandpa's hands. He was about 6'3" and skinny. I bet I never knew him a day that he weighed over 160 pounds, but 6'3". Those hands, though, they were thick, meaty, and strong. The calluses were evidence that he was a hard worker. Since that time, my dad has been doing a little bit of research on some of the activities during World War II in which my grandfather participated. Because we had seen pictures. We saw pictures of, he had pictures that were in the shoebox of him with some of his buddies in Paris. With him and some of his buddies in Germany. I think Stuttgart, don't hold me to that one. And it's like, man, what Grandpa see and do? A little bit more research. Grandpa's tank was part of the unit that was the second wave to arrive at the Battle of the Bulge. There's some interesting series and documentaries regarding the 101st Airborne and how the Battle of the Bulge was fought and how the tanks came in and saved the day. Although no one in the 101st Airborne would claim that they saved the day, they were going to win it, but that first one came through. That had nothing to do with my grandpa because he was in the second wave. The second wave of tanks and those soldiers that came with it, Their duty was to clean up what was left after the Battle of the Bulge. None of us know what Grandpa saw, what he experienced, where he got the German hand Luger. We don't know. He's not available for us to ask. And if he was, he wouldn't have let us. He wouldn't have let us. Now, I'm not sure if it was the war. I'm not sure if it was his work ethic, because core to his values was hard work. The answer to life's questions were, if you want a better life, you work hard. If you're going through tough circumstances, how do you make it through it? You work hard. So I don't know if it was demons from war. I don't know if it was oftentimes being unemployed when he came back from the war, but Grandpa drank. Maybe it was the drinking that led to the unemployment. I don't know. But while Grandpa was employed, on his way home from work, he would stop at the bar. And he was a pretty social fella. He really couldn't stand the thought of someone not drinking while he was at the bar drinking. So he would spend his money buying drinks for everybody at the bar. The bad news is, for the family, is that when he got home, he was drunk and the money was spent. When he didn't have a job, he could still hang out at the bar, because while he was unemployed, there were always several people who owed him a drink. So whether he was employed or unemployed, it was a little bit the same at the house. He was drunk and there was no money. So my dad, the oldest of 4 children, in a home affected by alcoholism, he was the one that in the middle of the night, when Grandpa was passed out in the front yard, Dad was the one that Grandma would wake up, ask him for help, and he would help his mother drag his dad back into the house. This is not a stretch in Galena when I ask you this question, because you've seen it. Some of you may have seen it this morning driving to school. Dad lived on that side of town. You know that side of town. That side of town that's where the drunks live. That's where real poverty exists in the home, where the kids are angry. And even in that side of town, no running water. I think about this boy who loved to play ball, living on that side of town with no running water in his house. When he was in junior high one time, and he tells this story better than I can tell it, by the way. In January, when the facility is in the backyard, you develop strategies for not having to go outside in the middle of the night, right? And it's in the form of a pot. And oftentimes you want to put that pot in a place that's very convenient when you wake up in the middle of the night, a place that you know you can find it, right there under the bed. And, right there under the bed, right next to the only pair of shoes that you own. So Dad tells a story. He's in junior high, and one January morning he wakes up, he's putting on his only pair of shoes, and he recognizes, must not have been the pot last night. It's his only pair of shoes. He goes to school. Maybe you've seen my dad in your hallways. He wasn't very big. When he graduated high school, he was 5'9", 115 pounds. So when he was in junior high, he was that little dude, angry, always in a fight. Because every little bump, every little look was someone picking a fight with him. He's a pre-adolescent living in a house without running water. He loves to play ball. And he's wearing a pair of shoes, his only pair of shoes to school. You know, the one he urinated in last night or last week. Maybe you can see him. Maybe you can hear him. And if you're real imaginative and have ever worked at the middle school, maybe you can smell it. When Dad went to high school, he was pretty good at playing ball. His freshman year in high school, he started the basketball season as the starting point guard on the sophomore basketball team. But he didn't get along with the coach. So by the end of the season, he was the third string point guard on the freshman basketball team. During his sophomore year, at a particular practice, a player on the team comes running down the floor and bumps into my dad, knocks him down. And you know the little guy, the one that's always mad, and every push and every bump is no accident. Now he was smart. He waited until the coach went down into the coach's office. And as Dad would tell it, he and Dad went after that other player. When Dad caught that other player, they were in the bleachers. Dad grabbed a handful of the back of that guy's head and was introducing the gentleman's face to the bleacher when somebody tried to break up the fight. Now, I'm no expert at breaking up fights, right? One thing I do know about fights, when there's one happening, it's not the smartest thing to do to grab someone from behind while they're waylaying on somebody, right? Because what happens when you grab somebody from behind, they come up and it's like, and they take a swing. Before my dad knew it, he was taking a swing at the head basketball coach. Dad was no longer on the basketball team. Interesting thing. Before his senior year, new basketball coach. And my dad, the hot-headed kid from that side of town, goes to the coach. He says, "Hey, coach," he says, "listen, I want to be a part of the team." Coach says, "All right, can you play?" Dad says, "Yeah, but here's the conditions for me being on the team. I made a mistake. It's not fair to the guys who have been on the team for a year and done all the right things for me to come in and play instead of them. So if you'll let me, I'll come to practice every day, and I'll practice against the varsity. And during games, I'll take care of the towels and the water bottles." So there's a picture of my dad in a school yearbook. He was the senior manager on the basketball team. He felt like he didn't deserve to be on the team. When my mom and dad were freshmen in high school, they met in their science class. And when Mom went home, she talked a little bit about this guy, Terry, that she had met in her science class. And basically, her brothers and sisters said, "He's no good. He's bad news. He lives on that side of the town, and he will never amount to anything." So Mom ignored him, stayed away. She followed the advice. But for this social butterfly, this person who loved to make people happy around her and have all these conversations, etc., it was really, really tough on Mom during her freshman year when she was figuring out that no one was talking to her. It was like no one wanted to be her friend, and she thought something was wrong. In fact, the only person at school that would talk to her and socialize with her was my dad. So she gave in and started dating my dad. Now, years later, actually I think it was their 50th wedding anniversary, they started talking about that. And when Mom told that story, Dad told his side of that story, and he said, well, yeah, no one was going to talk to you because I threatened every boy in school that if they did, I was going to kick their butt. Right? gets better. You know that homecoming queen thing I mentioned? Mom was telling her story about being homecoming queen and how everybody liked her. And then Dad told his version of the story. And he said, well, yeah, you were going to be homecoming queen. I made sure the players on the football team nominated you, and I threatened every boy if I found out they didn't vote for you, that I was going to kick their butt. There were a couple of fights on that one, too. A couple of fights on that one. My mom and dad finished high school and found themselves unwed, teenagers, and pregnant. Mom had dreams of going to nursing school. And Dad had dreams of being the first in his family to even think about going to college, let alone finish. I'm glad things worked out the way they did for that couple, that unwed, pregnant couple, because that was me. That was me. At 19, I hate to attach this to my grandma, but you know, that my grandma was a grandma at the age of 36. Think about that. I'm 52. Yeah, I mean, that's not even close. Not even close for me on that one. My dad got a job in St. Charles. He was working as a draftsman for McDonnell Douglas. They didn't hold grudges, I guess, because my brother came about a year and a half after me. But during that early period, my mom, she's crazy too, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned it, but she didn't think Dad was very happy. I mean, there were some indications that our home was going to be similar to the home that my dad had grown up in. Things weren't going good. And she asked my dad about it. She said, listen, if you don't want to go to work at McDonnell Douglas, what do you want to do? So they had a conversation. And what my dad wanted to do involved that dream about finishing that college degree. So my mom says the most logical thing a young mother who wants to stay at home with her kids might say, quit your job. Become a part, get 3 part-time jobs and a full-time college student so you can pursue the dream. So he did. We moved back to my dad's hometown and settled back in his neighborhood. Settled in his neighborhood. A couple things I do remember, because now I'm starting to remember some of these things. I remember this house that we just affectionately call the Rat House. And we call it the Rat House because every night my mom would take the time to come in and tuck me and my brother in at bed, in at night, and she'd scratch her back and she would say things like, don't pay attention to the circumstances. We could hear the rats scratching in the ceiling. Regardless of the circumstances and your present surroundings, you'll be able to accomplish anything that you set your mind to. You can do it. You'll be smart enough, you'll work hard enough, you can do it. And she would whisper that in our ear every night. One night, one of those rats got really adventurous, wanted something down in the sink, and apparently on its way down to the sink, got tangled up in the curtain, choked itself, and it was hanging there. It was quite a decorative morning for us to wake up, walk into the kitchen, and there hung a strangled rat. Not mouse like Mickey, I mean like rat, We do know the difference there. Another thing I remember about the Rat House on that side of town, I remember the day, so I was about 4 years old, and there was this kid. His dad owned the car dealership. Now really, if anybody is related or attached to a car dealership, I don't have a thing against people who own car dealerships. All right, so don't take that from this particular story. But this boy, his dad owned a car dealership, and he lived on that side of town. He got a brand new bicycle, and he made the decision to drive his brand new bicycle onto my side of town. Well, on my side of town, there were never brand new bicycles. And I made my first clothesline tackle and provided concrete evidence to my dad that I was like him. I was angry, and I was looking for a fight. Now, one of the places that we also lived at that particular time was at a trailer park. My mom and dad had somehow acquired a 20-foot trailer, and they put it in that trailer park, and it was 20 foot, and when it rained, we all had to huddle in that one corner, the only corner that didn't leak, right? But the really cool thing about that trailer park is that Sonia Socklaven's dad owned it, all right? Now, Sonia Socklaven, I know none of you know her, but she was the most beautiful young lady in Nashville, Illinois. Beautiful, smart. Her dad owned the trailer park. I mean, this is like social climbing, right? And Sonia and I, we go to kindergarten class together. And the crazy thing is, and I don't know how, and kindergarten teachers, you can talk to me after, but apparently I had a kindergarten teacher that did not speak the language of kindergarten. Because when I told Sonia that I loved her, I did it by pulling her hair. I did it by punching her. And I was my father's son, right? So the other thing that I did to communicate to Sonia that I loved her is I made sure no other boy could talk to her. And usually that was at recess, so we'd take care of that at recess. But unfortunately, like teacher didn't. Well, she didn't appreciate my love for Sonia. She just didn't appreciate my love for Sonia. And you know, I was my father's son in some ways, but I was a little bit not like my father's son, or I was not like my dad, because he was this short, scrawny dude, and in kindergarten I was kind of like the round mound or rebound, right? And there was a reason why I was like that, because, and ladies, I know you'll find this very impressive about my mother, but I was 10 pounds, 13 ounces when I came into this world. And at 10 pounds, 13 ounces, there's one thing you can say for sure about a baby that's 10 pounds, 13 ounces. He is hungry. He's hungry, right? And I stayed hungry. And that round mound or rebound was in that kindergarten class, and I'd take care of business. And the kindergarten teacher, she didn't like it. She didn't like that I wouldn't let those boys talk to Sonia, or I'd say that. So kindergarten teacher would take this round mound or rebound. He liked running around and liked playing ball like his dad. And she took him and made him miss recess. And then not only did I have to miss recess, I was that little old blonde-headed kid standing in the corner when everybody came in for recess. And here's where it gets bad, right? As if that wasn't bad enough. See, it gets really bad now because after recess they did snacks. And if you're in the corner during snacks, you don't get to eat snacks. But the round mound rebound, he just missed recess and loves to eat, was just deprived of snacks. Do you think my behavior got better as the day went on? Funny. So, wow, needless to say, oh, yeah, here's the thing too. You know those elementary class portraits that you take? You got the little risers, like 3 risers high, right? And you line the kids up, and they're all lined up. You got the teacher on one end, and you got the principal on the other end. Well, my kindergarten class portrait, I am top left on the riser, and Sonia is bottom right, okay? So in the picture, I'm looking down, not at Sonia. I'm looking at the boy standing next to Sonia. And in my kindergarten picture, I mean, I'm scowling down to the corner. And if you thought that was funny, you should have seen the boy's face standing next to Sonia. I mean, he just going, I can't believe she made me stay by Sonia. She should know what's going to happen to me. Oh boy, needless to say, my kindergarten report card, because we did have them back in the dark ages, right? And they did these things like N's, I's, and S's, right? Satisfactory, improving, needs improvement. Well, I had heard that they used S's. I never had any evidence that S's were a part of the grading system. But on the card later, when I could read it and say, oh, some people are supposed to get S's for satisfactory, and lots of N's. Lots of N's. And it was after kindergarten that my dad finished college. After kindergarten, my dad finished college. He got a job. We moved to a new town. We still lived in a trailer in that new town. But we went to a new town, and we went to a new school. I was like my dad. I loved to play ball. I was pretty impressed with myself as a young kindergarten student. I could count. I could count as high as you wanted to ask me to. I could count anywhere you wanted to by twos, if you wanted to. If they had the three-point line back then, I'd be able to count by threes. Because it is important to be able to keep score. Now, could I recite all 26 of the alphabet? No. Could I sight recognize the letters, let alone read a word when they were put together? I didn't need that to win the ball game. Didn't need it. So I couldn't do it. So we go to this new town. And you know, Mom takes me to school, and my new town, they introduced me to Miss Caliper. I'm going to start remembering names now. I don't remember the kindergarten teacher's name, and based on what I just said, it's probably a good thing. But she was probably a sweet, sweet, nice lady. Just wasn't in my eyes at the time. So they introduced me to Miss Caliper. They put me in Miss Caliper's class. About 3 weeks into school, Miss Caliper calls my mom. Now, my mom is used to phone calls from the school. So she's got an idea what these phone calls might be about. And Miss Caliper says, we would like to visit with you in person. And my mom had an idea what that might mean too, because there were some phone calls that were just phone calls, and then there were other phone calls that said, no, you need to be here. And they said, yeah, Miss Moore, you need to be here. So Mom comes up and talks about fear and trepidation. Mom's been through this. Oh my gosh, free with new school. Come on, man. Come on, make a good first impression on this new school. And come up to this meeting. We're in the meeting, and she's apologizing and doing all this. And Miss Caliper says, no, wait a minute. She said, Trey's not in trouble. Mom was like shocked. He's not in trouble. In fact, Trey's learning stuff, and we think maybe he would be better off in Mrs. Moss's class. And Mom's like, Mrs. Moss? So they brought Mrs. Moss in. And Mrs. Moss, she was this frail, little, 98-year-old woman. I'm 5 years old, and I'm looking up, and she had to be 98 because every lady looked 98 at school. And Mrs. Moss said, well, I'll let him in my class, but he needs to know this. He's going to work. And my mom tells the story. She says, I don't know how the lady didn't break her fingers on the desk. He's going to work. And Mom's like, what are we getting into here? I'm sitting there thinking, well, you know what? I like my grandpa. My grandpa said working hard. That's a good answer. That's a good thing. And so I think I got a little bit of work ethic from my grandpa. I don't want to paint it out like my grandpa was all bad. There were always redeeming things. There were things that we love about grandpa. I think the rumor's out that I am a St. Louis Cardinal baseball fan. And based on recent performances, I am in mourning. I cover it with a smile. And I am in mourning. I'm a St. Louis Cardinal baseball fan. It really has nothing to do with the fact that I grew up in Southern Illinois, 25 miles away from the stadium, because I never went to the stadium. The reason I'm a St. Louis Cardinal baseball fan is because most weekends, my dad, we would go back to Grandpa's house. Grandpa would light his charcoal grill. We'd pitch horseshoes. And we'd listen to Jack Buck do the play-by-play of the St. Louis Cardinal baseball. Now, aside from the obvious difference between the two Missouri teams, like, the St. Louis Cardinals have a chance to win every year, and the Royals have to wait 30 years before they have another winning season. The real reason I'm a Cardinal fan is because of that memory. Charcoal grill, pitching horseshoes, Jack Buck doing the play-by-play. So when the teacher, Mrs. Moss, says, "You got work," I'm all right. Grandpa talked about work. I'll do it. Now, what I didn't know about what Mrs. Moss really meant by work was that she felt like I was behind, and I was behind her class. And I do not know who invented this. I mean, it's almost like having that round amount of rebound have to skip breaks, right? But Miss Moss said, "You're going to catch up because you don't get to go to recess until you're caught up." What? So I'm thinking, this is not a deal. I like the hard work and all, but skip recess? You've got to be kidding me. Well, I stay in that first day, and to be honest with you, it was probably a tough day for Miss Moss too, because I wasn't very compliant. But at the end of recess, see the bells ringing, and the kids are coming in from, all the other kids are coming in from outside. Mrs. Moss, she just kind of subtly walks around to my desk where I'm finishing up whatever task, or not finishing up, whatever task she wanted me to do. And she got right up to my desk, and she just kind of backed up, and she just kind of drops, opens her hand, and out of her hand drops onto my desk Red Hots. Now that doesn't sound like much to you, but it is food. So I'm good with staying in at recess. So I stay in at recess, and I get caught up. And now I know how to read, and I can do my math. And you know, because I had done all that hard work. Like how I gave up my recesses so I could catch up and all that hard work. You know, I deserve to be caught up. You know what a little first grader doesn't realize? At least not back in my hometown in the early 1970s. Elementary teachers' recess was during our recess. The only time away from the students that Mrs. Moss had during the day was during recess. Mrs. Moss didn't take my recesses from me. Mrs. Moss gave me her recesses so that I could learn how to read. Mrs. Moss sent me to Mrs. Beaver. I liked Mrs. Beaver, but I got sick and I missed a lot of school. And I went to summer school after the second grade. And I must have like this mental block that's blocking off what happened. My mom has had to fill in the gaps just a little bit. She doesn't really know what happened either, but she does know that by the end of summer school, after my second grade year, I hated school. I hated it. So Mom was back into that fear and trepidation thing, because you know how moms are, right? They want their kids to love school, they want their kids to keep learning, they want their kids to be successful, those types of things. And all of a sudden I'm telling Mom, you ain't sending me to school. But she sent me to school, and she introduced me to Mrs. Dawson. And to hear my mom tell the story, my mom tells the story of Mrs. Dawson like she's a miracle worker. Like she's a miracle worker. That somehow Mrs. Dawson had that magic Dixie, dust, you know, magic dust. Pixie dust, there we go. Magic dust to sprinkle that made me want to learn and want to be in school again and reignited a love for learning in me. And that's the way Mom told it. So that's the way I told it. Until the one time I was telling the story and Mrs. Dawson had traveled with my mom. That was kind of cool. It was about 5 years ago. And Mrs. Dawson came with my mom to listen to me tell the story. But as we were walking to the parking lot, after the story, Mrs. Dawson said, "That was really an interesting story you told about the third grade." Yeah, didn't you like it? I mean, you're the hero. She said, "Oh, it wasn't accurate." I'm like, "What?" Mom's like, "What? What are you talking about?" Mrs. Dawson said, "I didn't do anything special." She said, when you came into my class, I saw you. And I saw something in you. And I just made sure that we created the environment in the class so that it would continue to grow. Wow. She saw something in me that I didn't even know about myself. Of course, I was in the 3rd grade. What would you expect? But she saw something in me that my mom didn't even see. My dad didn't see. Mrs. Dawson. Mrs. Kenton, 4th grade. I loved her, but she was evil. And there was this concept that we were introduced to in the 4th grade. It was called homework. My concept for home was home, play ball. Mrs. Kenton said do schoolwork when you get home. I survived it. Mrs. Hill in the 5th grade, loved her. And then in the 6th grade, I loved Mrs. Lemke, and I thought Mrs. Lemke loved me until. Mrs. Lemke did the cruelest, meanest thing to any 6th grade student. Now, I understand it's a little bit different configuration, right? We had elementary through the 6th grade, and then because the most evil thing that a 6th grade teacher could do at that time was promote a student to the 7th grade. Because in the 7th grade, all kinds of, and then you can put whatever expletive you want into that. Breaks loose, right? 7th grade is where all the embarrassing things happen. And you start, sports. Sports happen too, right? Which I love ball, so sports, that should be a good thing. And in fact, I remember 7th grade track. 7th grade track, and the round mound to rebound was no longer round mound to rebound. The round mound to rebound was about 5'2" and looking like he was going to end up scrawny like his dad, right? And I go out for track my 7th grade year, and the first day of track season. And listen, I know coaches, you wouldn't do anything like this to your athletes anymore. I got it, because it was cruel and unusual punishment. But they lined us up on the gym floor, rows and columns, and they made us do these calisthenic things. And there was this one where you're laying on the ground, and you're supposed to hold your feet 6 inches off the ground, right? Some people of my generation, they remember, because surely it doesn't exist. But we hold them 6 inches off the ground, and then they'd say, hold it right there. It's got to freeze right there. And so mine didn't. I tried, but it wouldn't stay at 6 inches, so I'd bounce them. I'd do scissors, bounce, scissors, bounce, scissors, up and down, up, scissors, down, I thought I had some rhythm. But this coach, he walks by, and I'm laying down on the ground, and coaches don't do this, because I know this still is out there, but not in Galena. Coach walks by, he stands over me. He says, Moeller, you're a wuss. I'm in the 7th grade. I had no idea what a wuss was. But based on his tone, I inferred, like that word, inferred, that he was not paying me a compliment. He was not paying me a compliment. Now, 7th grade track was really, really interesting because, in fact, I've told you a little bit of it already. But some of the things, I don't know if I told you or not, but one of the things is that they put me in the shot put. Did I tell you that one? The one track meet, they put me in the shot put. And 5'2", I was an obvious candidate for the shot put. But I'm going to tell you this, I got a 3rd place ribbon from one of the track meets. My mom's got it in a shoebox at the house. She does. What she doesn't tell people is that day they only entered 3 people in the shot put. And I got 3rd. I've already told, most of you have heard the track story. I'm going to tell it again just a little bit. They put me in a 1-lap race. And when they assigned these events, and we lined up for the 1-lap race, they had the kids that they thought might win the race. And Kier Pashaw was one of those kids. 6'1" in the 7th grade, 6'7" if you count the afro. And he had a chance to win the race. He could run like the wind. And then there was Trey, you know, the 3rd place ribbon in the shot put. And starter puts me in the good luck zone. And I'm thinking, how can I be in the same race as Kier? There's no way I can run this race. I've got no place trying to compete with Kier in this race. So I'm sick, got to throw up. Starter sharp starts the gun. It's a 440-yard dash, so 1 lap around the track, and I run. And I run hard because the coach says, you will dash. I'm sick, I'm tired, I can't breathe. But the coach says, you better not quit. You better not quit. I turn the corner. The only reason I'm not quitting is because the coach says, don't quit. And I turn the corner, and you know what happens when you feel like everything's against you. When you're tired and you don't think you can take another step, the wind starts to blow against you. And as the wind is blowing against me in this 1-lap race, I get halfway and I hear the cheers. I'm hoping they might be for me, but they're not. I look over at the finish line and I see Kier finishing the race. I'm embarrassed. I get upset. I feel like I have to throw up. I can't breathe. I'm starting to cry, and it's a tough race. And then as I finish that last turn, to add insult to injury, there's only one person at the track meet that even knows I'm still running the race. The starter's at the finishing line. And with everyone else scattering across the track, getting ready for the next event, he has to make a track call. Track! Clear the track! So that I can finish the race. But I didn't quit. I didn't like the coach. And I never went back out the track. But I like playing ball, so I kept playing sports. And I started growing a little bit in the 8th grade. By my freshman year in high school, I'd grown up a little bit. And on the freshman football team, I was the quarterback on the freshman football team. That's pretty good for a kid who got 3rd place in the shot put. And during about halfway through the season, one of the worst things that could happen to a freshman, the starting freshman quarterback in a program, is when the varsity quarterback gets injured. And if for some event, some of you are out there thinking, he's going to tell a story about how he went from freshman quarterback and started as a freshman on the varsity football team. Thank you. Thank you for that credit that you afforded me as an athlete. Not even close. Not even close. Because Rob Flanagan was the starting quarterback on the sophomore team. So Rob went to the varsity team, and they moved me, the freshman, to the sophomore team. Wow, that was pretty cool. Freshman quarterback starting on the sophomore football team, except for one detail. One detail. There was a junior high track coach who was the head sophomore football coach. And here's how practice went for his freshman, now starting quarterback on the sophomore team. I'll have to move. In football, if you've ever seen practice, sometimes, I don't know if you do this or not, right? But sometimes football coaches will say, first team offense, you get ready, and they'll have a second huddle, second team offense, you line up over here, you get ready, and the first team will run the play, the second team will run the play in succession, and then there's a scout team defense to play over here. So here's how it went. First team quarterback, coach would say, all right, run the play. If I made a mistake running the play, freshman on the sophomore football team, if I made a mistake running the play, the coach would blow the whistle, The sophomores would go to the end line of the football field, and the coaches would make me stand next to them and watch the sophomores do 2 sets of what we called field drills, which were sprint, fall on your belly, sprint, fall on your belly, etc. If I ran the play right, the coach would point. And if he would point to the second team offense, that means go line up at guard and play guard with the second team offense. If he pointed to the scout team defense, that meant go play linebacker for the scout team defense. In other words, I never had a play off. Well, I did get a couple plays off, and those were the times that instead of pointing to one of the huddles, the coach would point to the baseball field, across the field, and I would have to run a lap. While the second team ran their play, I would have to run a lap all the way around the baseball field and be back in the huddle for the next play. If I was not in the huddle for the next play, whistle would blow, sophomores would line up on the line, I would stand on the sidelines next to the coach. Let's say that life in the locker room was, well, it was a good thing I was like my dad. Because life in the locker room was not always pleasant. Not always pleasant. Here's another thing my sophomore year. The coach, same one, same coach. As outside linebacker, we had this drill. I don't know if we still use the word force or outside contain, but as an outside linebacker, the responsibility was to turn the play in to everybody else. So there was this drill where basically we would stand, they'd say hit, we would come across the line, and we would have a fullback about 20 yards away, get a running start, and he was pretending to be the lead block. We had to take on the lead block, keeping our outside arm free so that we would turn the play inside. That's close, right? Well, we still have to do that right now. Never mind, we can talk later. So it's Trey's turn. Moeller, up. All right, so I come up, first play. Boom, boom. Good job. Back to the huddle. He says, no, Moeller. Again. All right, come up. Boom, boom. All right, good job. Have another play. Moeller. Again. 8th time in a row. 8th time in a row. On the 8th rep, the fullback was one of my classmates. His name was Jin Chin King. Jin Chin King. I grew up 6 miles from an Air Force base. It was a melting pot of humanity. But Jin Chin King was about this tall and about this wide. I'm not sure what Jin Chin King had in store or what he was thinking, why he didn't like me that day. But I mean, he brought it. For 20 yards, I stepped across and I took the block on. I start coming back and I open my eyes. Now I want you to note in this whole story, Jin Chin did not knock me down. He did not knock me down. He knocked me out, but I was standing. And I come to and I open my eyes. Or at least I thought I opened my eyes. So I checked again. Yep, I opened my eyes. Couldn't see a thing. I mean, I'm standing there and I'm thinking, well, I hope somebody in town has a dog they'll give me. I hope somebody knows how to read Braille, because Mom and Dad aren't going to pay for me to learn how to read Braille, I can tell you that. There's not, I mean, Dad got a new job, but we don't have that kind of money. But the good news is, it's like, so it came back. Not blind. Thinking, this is good. So I started heading back to the end of the line. Good job, high five. And the coach says, Moeller, one more time. I'm like, Coach, did you not see, like blind? One more time. He says, out. Good enough. Now, some of you mamas out there, I really hope that somewhere along the way you have some kind of genuine concern for me as a human being. And in the back of your brain, you're thinking, where was that boy's mama in the middle of this? The coach is cussing him. The coach embarrasses him. The coach gets him in fights in the locker room after practice. The coach gets him knocked out during practice, but makes him go back in for the next play. Well, Mama was around, but there was a problem. There was a problem. See, the coach, the track coach, and the football coach, see, when his family was young, he had 2 boys, and he used to go home on the weekends, and his dad would light the charcoal grill, pitch horseshoes, and listen to Jack Buck do the play-by-play of St. Louis Cardinal baseball. Now, just in case we're sleeping in the shadows, the coach was my dad. I couldn't run home and rat on the coach, because if I ran home, I'd be ratting to the coach about the coach. See, my dad's dad taught him that the answer to life's questions is work hard. My dad had added to that equation. Life's tough, not fair, and you better be tougher. Well, I'm going to fast forward just a little bit. I never was really a great football player, but I worked hard. And I worked hard enough so that I could go play college football. And so I played college football 1 year at Murray State in Kentucky, and then I finished out at Missouri Southern. I played football at Missouri Southern. And while I was there as a football player, I met a volleyball player. And I mean, you know, it was a match made in heaven, right? A college football player dating and then getting married to a college volleyball player. And life is good. Life is good. We're married for about 4 years. In that 4th year, I'm teaching and coaching. My wife is teaching and coaching. She's a high school business teacher, and she was coaching volleyball. And we decided to start a family. So like a lot of young couples, you know, you start planning and dreaming about who your kid, you know, what kind of life your child's going to have. And, you know, I mean, can you imagine? I mean, this kid, the child of 2 college athletes, the child of 2 teachers. I mean, she's academically, forget it. She's going to be the top of every class that's out there. Athletically, she's just got to show up and she's going to be good. All these dreams about who she's going to be, what she'll accomplish in her life. And on May the 6th, 1992, my daughter was born. The most disappointing thing in the day. No, I shouldn't say it that way. That's terrible, 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 terrible. The disappointment that my wife feared the most, because we waited to find out the gender. But when my daughter came into the world, no kidding, the first words out of my wife's mouth was, "I'm sorry, it's not a son." But it didn't matter. I mean, I was holding her. She was right there. And I mean, until you felt it, I can't even say, you know, because you don't know until you feel it. And I'm like, oh man. I mean, I thought being a college athlete was it. I mean, I thought working hard, being tough, doing all those things, that was it. But here was this baby. And they do all these tests, they do these things, and I mean, not to brag or anything, but she was perfect. I mean, I wasn't surprised, right? She was my daughter. And they do these tests, and they've got these scales, they checked the sucking reflex, and she started to suck, and they said 10 out of 10. They checked her weight. I don't know what they all check. They pinch the skin, see if the blood comes back. But they do all these things. It's 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10. Yeah, of course. Perfect. I'm not perfect. She's perfect. First female president. Heck with president. We'll just be richer than you can get if you're not, whatever. You know the dreams the parents have for their kids. The expectations you develop, you feel them kicking, you hear the heartbeat. Two and a half months later, I come home from practice. It's a summer camp. And as I walk into my house, I hear my wife screaming. It's kind of like that feeling, you know, until you've heard it. You really haven't heard it. It's the scream that you can feel. The one that instantly you know something's wrong. So I run through my house and I find my wife. And my 2.5-month-old perfect daughter is lying on the floor in the middle of a grand mal seizure. We take her to the hospital. We try to stop the seizures, but they can't. In the middle of the night, the doctor comes in and says, Trey, would you like us to fly her to Tulsa or to Kansas City? Tulsa or Kansas City, what do you mean? Well, that's where we take all of the critically ill infants. See, Joplin doesn't have a NICU yet. So when we have infants in this condition, we have to take them somewhere else. So my wife gets her first helicopter ride to Tulsa. My younger sister, she's about 8 years behind me. I didn't tell my stories about her. The gifted kid who's the valedictorian, you know, the black sheep of the family. She's in town. And she and I, we go back to the house. We gather our things and we drive to Tulsa. And when I get to Tulsa, by the time I get to Tulsa, they've already kind of figured things. They've been trying to figure things out, but by the time we get there, they figure some things out. And basically, the diagnosis is that Trishelle had a viral infection. A viral infection that traveled through her spinal fluid up into her cranial cavity. And the way the doctor described it to me was that, when you get a viral infection in the cranial cavity, it's like screwing the top off of someone's skull and pouring acid onto the brain. The virus just basically, it just dissolves. It dissolves brain cells. And sometimes it manifests itself as seizures, but in essence, your daughter's brain cells are being dissolved at this moment. And he said, listen, before you go in, I want to prepare you and see her before you go in and see her. He says, first of all, I want you to know this, that infants in that condition, 50% of them will live. Of the 50% that live, 3% will appear on the outside to be living a normal life. But none of them will really be living a normal life because their brain is being changed. And listen, before you go in, you need to know this too. Because it's viral, we can't, there is no antibiotic. The only way to fight a virus is the body's own natural defenses. And so this is pretty significant. So we're making sure that every ounce of energy that is in your daughter's body is being spent on fighting the virus. And So you'll go in and there'll be those EEG things fired to her head. I walked in to see it myself. A 2.5-month-old perfect daughter. They had stopped the seizures. They had stopped the seizures by inducing her into a coma. A coma she stayed in for 9 days. She had a breathing tube going down into her lungs, and the machine was breathing for her. Didn't want to waste the energy on breathing. There was a feeding tube, not to her stomach, because they didn't want to waste the energy on digesting food. There was a nourishment tube going into her arm, already digested nourishment to supplement her system. There was because of the medicine that it took to stop the seizures and its deteriorative effect on human arteries. They had to go get the strongest artery, so they surgically implanted an IV into the artery right next to her heart, so that the artery would survive longer than the coma, or at least they hoped would last. And all of a sudden, I couldn't work hard enough. This macho football player thought he was tougher than life. And this college athlete wife thought she was pretty tough too. We were knocked to our knees. We weren't tough enough. There was one responsibility I had: protect and take care of my daughter. I couldn't do it. As smart as I thought I was, as tough as I thought I was, as independent as I thought I was, I learned in a very real way I couldn't do it by myself. People started coming. My family from Illinois showed up at the hospital. My wife and I were teachers and coaches. I know how school people love each other because they loved us. They held us up when we couldn't hold ourselves up. I learned to add to the formula that hard work's good, being tough is better. That we're all better together, and that we need each other. Very, very serious things. And we need each other every day to support each other. My daughter was one of the 50% that lived. She was not one of 50% who appears to be living a normal life. If you have not already met Trishelle, you'll meet her. I'll have her at the football games. I'll have her at the ball games. We'll have her around. She'll be around town. But she's different. Some labels we use when we describe Trishelle through the years. Have been cortically blind, nonverbal, cerebral palsy. I don't even know the mobility thing. But she relies on us for everything. Take care of every personal need for her. We've lived the life as parents through the IEP process. We've been to that annual meeting, that statutorily required meeting, where we are reminded something's wrong with your daughter. No kidding. When my daughter was about 7, my wife stopped going to IEP meetings. She couldn't take it. The delicate flower was crushed. She was tough, but she was delicate on the inside. She couldn't take going to the IEP meetings and being reminded every year of all the things that were wrong with my daughter. I remember going to an IEP meeting without my wife one time, and I was, my hurt came out different. My wife's hurt was an emotional response. My response to hurt, what do you think? The son, the boy that grew up on that side of town, was a college linebacker. What do you think my hurt looks like? Anger. And my anger looks like arrogance. Even though I walk into a room, and these are my colleagues, these are my friends, and they have this meeting, and God bless them, they love Trishelle. They can't help the fact that it's a meeting that reminds us. One year, my boss called me into his office and scolded me for my anger and my arrogance that I had displayed to the people going to the IEP meeting. He was right. That's what they got from me. Man, sometimes when we're hurting, and that hurt comes out and it looks like and it sounds like something different than who we want to be, what do we want from them? We want them to look below the surface, to see what's really going on. Don't judge me. Come alongside me. Be curious, don't get furious. That's what our kids need from us too, isn't it? I don't know what's on the inside, but I know sometimes on the outside things boil over and they look terrible. They sound terrible. Sometimes that kid needs from us not furious, but curious. Being the parent of Trishelle in a wheelchair, one of the most isolating things I've ever experienced in my life. Because we would push her wheelchair down the aisle at the mall, and we could see people notice us and clear the path. It's like a 20-foot radius rule. Don't get near them, or we might catch what they've got. I coached ball, I played ball. Now when I go to ball, where do the wheelchairs go in the gymnasium? They're usually down there in the corner. You know that really safe place where a player might run into the person in the wheelchair, or a loose ball might hit them, right? And oh, by the way, in like the bigger stadiums, not high school stadiums, but if you go to a college game, they got a special place for you. They're usually not very good seats, and they'll let one family member sit with the handicapped person. Oh, so if I go to a college football game, I get to sit with my daughter and the rest of my family gets to sit up there. Yeah, it's ADA compliant. I got a whole other talk on that stuff too, so I'm going to hit the transition. You know, 4 years later, my wife and I did the bravest thing we ever did. We had another child. My son Trenton, 4 years later, we said our prayers. Oh, did we say our prayers? And Trenton came out, and he's been the answer to our prayers. The one most significant prayer we said was, oh God, just please, 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 average. I mean, we're good. I mean, after everything we've been through, just average. Okay? That's a lie, though. We said, give us average. But every time average got cut from a team, man, did it feel like we got kicked in the stomach. Every time average didn't make the grade or get picked for the lead role. Oh. Hey, guy, can I change my prayers real quick, please? My son's a hard-working kid. He did more with average than I've ever seen. Ended up being a college athlete. He was a high school pitcher. At Missouri Southern, by the way. You're right. So we got a little green and gold living in the house. He's a second-year football, basketball, and baseball coach down in Seneca. Very proud of Trent. Very proud of Trent. Tonight in some of your buildings, there's going to be a whole bunch of parents and kids that show up. And you know what they want to find when they show up tonight? Or when they show up Monday at the school? You know what they want to find? They want to find someone who thinks their kid is special. Even if they're average. They want someone to think their kid is special. The kids are going to show up tonight, and they're going to show up on Monday. They're going to be rich kids, and they're going to be poor kids. They're going to be happy kids, they're going to be sad kids. They're going to be students whose second language is English, who are being raised by a single parent, who are living in homes that are affected by substance abuse. They're angry. They're going to be average. They're going to be a homecoming queen. They're going to be kids that get in a fight, throw a punch at their coach. But they're going to show up tonight and next Monday, and they're going to find you. They're going to find us. You know, I started this whole thing with one of the most important things that we can do is learn, get to know each other. And you know, I've told you some stories now. And for the most part, I mean, you guys are really, really good at looking like you're still awake, and I appreciate that. A couple of you. But, so, yeah, that's the cue, Ross. We're almost there. Are you there? So, I lost my train of thought. They're going to show up. Oh, yeah, get to know you. Last spring, I asked Dana to help me get to know you. And my question for Dana at the time was, Dana, what's it mean to be a bulldog? Can you do something so that you can teach me what it means to be a bulldog? Now, I didn't know Dana at the time. Someone suggested today, we'll talk to Dana, maybe she can help us. So I asked Dana to help. And what we end up with is this that you're getting ready to watch. And it's something that you'll notice about this is that Dana didn't do it by herself. Dana found team members. Dana used the talents and efforts of students for this. So what's it mean to be a bulldog? First must be hope. When our students show up tonight, and they show up on Monday, who will they find? When our students show up on Monday, this is who they'll find. Maybe with different circumstances and different details of the story, but our students will find people who give up their recesses so that they can succeed. They will find people that see in their lives something that they and or their parents don't even know exists yet. They will find people who will not let them quit. They will find people who whisper in their ears, you can do it. You can do it. They will find agents of hope. Who are we? We are bulldogs. Even in this terribly busy time, I asked our maintenance department to be here today. Many have stayed through what has run over, sorry Dennis, just a little bit more than the schedule. We have some cushion. And they're about to go take care of the business of making sure our environment is ready for our kids to finish making it ready. So, maintenance department, if you're in the maintenance department, ladies and gentlemen, would you stand up just a second? Maintenance department. Yeah, I know, that's your corner, you're all back there. Right. There we go. Don't sit down, you're leaving. Thank you, and now get out of here and finish the job. We appreciate all of you, the hard work that goes into making our schools what it is for our kids. Now, we will segue into, what was next? Toby's next. So our principals are going to